Good morning. Welcome to online classes. Today I am going to explain you the first lesson of supplementary reader, uh, footprints without print. The first lesson, which is namely the footprint without feet, is the name of your book, and the first lesson is namely A Triumph of Surgery, written by James Herriot. James Herriot is supposed to be a veterinarian surgeon. The person who deals with the animals in their health is known as veterinarian. So, the story, A Triumph of Surgery, revolves around a small dog which was namely Tricky, and its mistress, who was very loving to it, and she was namely Mrs. Pumphrey. So, Tricky was a greedy dog who loved food but do no exercise. As a result, he became very fat. So, Mrs. Pumphrey believed that her dog became lazy due to suffering from malnutrition. Although he was suffering from malnutrition, but not because of underfeeding but overfeeding. Mrs. Pumphrey was a very rich and emotional lady who had a cute pet dog. It was a small dog which was namely Tricky. She loved and pampered it so much that she usually overfed it. Tricky had put on a lot of weight, which made it slow and pathetic. So when Dr. James Herriot saw a fat dog moving on the road along with its mistress, because he was a vet surgeon, he immediately approached the lady and he tried to make her understand not to overfeed the dog. And he gave a timely schedule, how to feed the dog and how to take care of that. But the lady did not follow that schedule. And after some time, when she made a call to Mr. Herriot that my dog is suffering from some kind of illness, you just please come and have a proper checkup of it and just suggest some medicines. Then doctor visited to the house and he found that the lady has not followed the proper schedule and fixed intervals of giving it daily meal. So he thought that the pet cannot be cured at home. So he gave an advice to the lady that the dog cannot be cured at home. He has to shift to the hospital. So she was very sad after getting this advice of a vet surgeon, and because she was very much loving to her dog, and hardly she could accept this proposal, and she got ready to send that animal to the hospital. Then along with a lot of props, a very cozy bed and the couch of the animal, and some bowls which were necessary for feeding it, she gave to the doctor, and with a very heavy heart she departed her dog. And the veterinarian surgeon, he brought the dog to the hospital and he tried to cure that naturally. When Tricky was at home, he was pampered and overfed by its mistress. Now, when Mrs. Pumphrey saw her active dog, she thanked the doctor and felt that it was a triumph of surgery. Okay. Now, because it is almost impossible for her, because it was overweight, and she thought that it is very difficult for my dog to get to attain the better health. But when the vet surgeon James Herriot, he gave an information to the lady. Now your dog is getting recovery day by day, and soon it will be all right. Then she became very happy, and Dr. James Herriot said her that now he told her that I am just doing some surgeries which are very useful and necessary in order to make it fit and active again. So James Herriot has written all of his stories, maximum stories, based on his personal experience, how to cure animals basically. And James Herriot is a vet surgeon, James was going by the car. He saw a woman, namely Mrs. Pumphrey. As he saw the dog Tricky, he was shocked. The dog was extremely overfed. He offered an advice to Mrs. Pumphrey not to feed more than requirement. Then Mrs. Pumphrey replied she couldn't resist to offer its favorite food to eat. Anyhow, she had to avoid extra food to eat. When Mrs. Pumphrey didn't make a call to Mr. James Herriot for many days, so he thought that the dog might be cured, and Mrs. Pumphrey would have understood not to feed the dog unnecessarily. But one day when she made a call to James Harriet regarding her dog's unwellness, then James reached to her house and inspected the dog. He found that there was no any change in its routine food and feeding habits. Then Mrs. Pumphrey was offering every favorite food to it. Then he understood the situation and expressed his advice to that lady to cure her dog in the hospital only, as its treatment was not possible at home. Mrs. Pumphrey became sad and didn't want to keep away her dog as she loved it very much. But for its betterment, she accepted its advice and let it go to the hospital with a lot of preparations such as its cozy bed, couch, bowls, and other props. James Harriet brought the dog to his hospital and he started giving treatment to it. He stopped giving extra calories and rich food to the dog. The times were certain for the meal of the animals, so he used to ring a bell to gather all the dogs to feed in a large size bowl. The food was kept in a large size bowl, and when he used to ring the bell, all dogs have to run towards that area where the food was kept. In the hospital, there were so many dogs who had to compete with each other in order to get their diet share. In early few days, it was a bit difficult for Tricky because it was a very pampered and lazy dog. But after a few days, it learned how to feed itself. In a few months, it shed a lot of weight and became very active and healthy. When Mrs. Pumphrey reached to find its routine health report, she saw her dog, which was totally turned on, an active dog. She thanked to Dr. James Harriet very much for its rapid recovery. James Harriet told her to follow a prescribed routine to feed the dog, not to overfeed, and not to show out of the way concern. It became very playful and very healthy ultimately, and ran towards its owner immediately to show its love. Mrs. Pumphrey also embraced her happily, and she thanked a lot to the vet surgeon. So this is all about your lesson, and how did a very unhealthy dog become a healthy one. So it was a triumph of surgery. Although the vet surgeon did not commit any surgery, did not perform any surgery, but still the dog it became healthy because of its natural therapy. Okay. So the questions which are very much possible from this lesson are about the surgeon, how did he cure the animal, and about the behavior of the lady, the rich lady who had a dog, how did she behave along with the dog, how did she pamper the dog, and what was the result of this pampering. And the characters, there are three main characters. First is the lady or the owner of the pet dog. She was namely Mrs. Pumphrey. Second one is the Tricky dog, small dog, and third is James Harriet. I hope you understood the lesson, and the most important thing is to learn the meanings of the lesson. Some meanings are very new in this lesson, as convalescing. The meaning of convalescing is getting recovery slowly. So all these things I hope you understand and you will follow. And whenever you find any difficulty, you can ask me questions in the comment box and also on the WhatsApp. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.